December the 22nd, 1971, Anchorage, Alaska. 18-year-old Cecilia Beth Van Santen left her house on Knik Avenue and walked a few blocks towards the local supermarket. 3 days later, on Christmas Day 1971, her body was discovered in Chugach State Park. She had been sexually assaulted and her chest sliced open with a hunting knife. She was bound and dumped, still alive, in a ravine and left to die from exposure. 12 years later, the location of her death would be found marked on an aeronautical map with a tiny X. One of 37 such marks that showed the burial sites of a cold-blooded killer who hunted women for sport. Let's examine the case of Robert Hansen, the butcher baker of Alaska. Robert Christian Hansen was born on February the 15th, 1939, in Estherville, Iowa. Hansen struggled with social interactions, plagued by severe acne and a stutter, which made him a target for bullies. These early experiences contributed to his deep-seated resentment towards women, whom he blamed for his social ostracism. Hansen found solace in two things: baking and hunting. He developed exceptional skills in hunting and archery, hobbies that would later become macabre tools in his crimes. Hansen moved to Anchorage, Alaska in the late 1960s, where he opened a bakery and appeared to be a respectable member of the community. But behind Hansen's seemingly benign exterior lay a calculating predator. By night, the baker became the butcher who preyed on women. He targeted sex workers and dancers. Hansen's modus operandi involved abducting women, often at gunpoint, and taking them by car or using his aeroplane to remote areas where he would unleash unimaginable terror. Hansen would sexually assault his victims and then allow them the fleeting hope of escape, only to hunt them down like animals. The remote Alaskan wilderness provided the perfect cover for these heinous acts, where he used his hunting skills to stalk and kill his victims. Despite being a known sex offender, Hansen was allowed to prey on women for more than a decade. Hansen's first arrest was for arson in December 1960. But in December 1971, Hansen was arrested twice. First, for the attempted rape of a housewife, and then for raping a prostitute. Hansen was sentenced to 5 years in prison, but after serving only 6 months of his sentence, he was placed on a work release program and released to a halfway house. But following his release, Hansen continued killing for 12 years. His victims included 17-year-old Megan Emmerich, who vanished on July the 7th, 1973. Her body was never recovered. 22-year-old Mary Kathleen Throw, who disappeared on July the 5th, 1975. Her body was also never found. 24-year-old topless dancer Joanne Messina, who had dinner with Hansen on May the 19th, 1980. He then drove her to a remote location by the Snow River and killed her and her dog. An unidentified woman, dubbed Eclutana Annie, whose body was discovered on July the 21st, 1980, in a shallow grave in Eclutana. Hansen later confessed to having stabbed her in the back when she attempted to escape. 24-year-old Roxanne Eastland, who vanished on June the 28th, 1980, from the Budget Motel in Anchorage. Her body was never discovered, but Hansen later admitted to killing her. 23-year-old exotic dancer Sue Luna, who met Hansen at a nightclub on May the 23rd, 1982. She agreed to an offer of $300 to do a photo shoot for Hansen, a ruse he repeatedly used to lure victims. Instead, Hansen abducted her and took her to a secluded area. He stripped her naked and forced her to flee into the forest so that he could hunt her like an animal. Her body was discovered on April the 24th, 1984. Other victims included Lisa Fratelli, Shelley Moreau, Andrea Mona Altieri, Robin Palkey, Delyn Renee Frey, Paula Golding, Malaya Larson, Angela Lynn Fedden, and Tamoria Pedersen. When the bodies of many of Hansen's victims were discovered, it was found that despite suffering fatal wounds, their clothing was undamaged, suggesting that they had been killed while naked and then redressed before being buried. After discovering the bodies, Joanna Messina, Sherry Moreau, and the unidentified woman known as Ekrutana Annie, Detective Glenn Flo of the Alaska State Troopers believed a serial killer was active around Anchorage. Flo contacted FBI Special Agent John Douglas and requested help profiling the killer. Agent Douglas thought the killer would be an experienced hunter with low self-esteem, have a history of being rejected by women, and feel compelled to keep souvenirs of his murders, such as the victim's jewelry. He also suggested that the killer might stutter. The profile matched Hansen, but despite the mounting evidence, Hansen's benign public persona and a false alibi from a friend allowed him to initially avoid suspicion and kept him free to kill with impunity. The breakthrough only came in 1983, when one of his victims managed to escape. On June 13, 1983, Hansen met 17-year-old Cindy Paulson. After agreeing to pay her for sex, Hansen instead kidnapped Paulson at gunpoint. She was first sexually assaulted at his house, before he bound her and took her to Merrill Field, where he kept his aeroplane, a Piper P-8-18 Super Cub. While Hansen was preparing the plane, Paulson managed to get out of the car and ran for help. She was picked up by a truck driver named Robert Yent, who took her to safety. Paulson's testimony allowed police to secure a warrant to search Hansen's plane, vehicles, and home. On October 27, 1983, investigators uncovered jewelry belonging to some of the missing women, as well as an array of firearms. Hidden behind Hansen's headboard, police also found the aeronautical chart with 37 little X's marked on it. The map linked Hansen to murders dating back to Cecilia Beth Van Zanten in 1971. With Paulson's testimony and the substantial evidence found in Hansen's home, authorities arrested him. In 1984, Hansen was convicted and sentenced to 461 years plus life in prison without the possibility of parole. After spending 30 years in prison, Hansen died on August 21, 2014, at the age of 75. While Hansen's story has been depicted in various films, such as the 2007 film Naked Fear, about a serial killer who hunts and abducts women, and the 2013 film The Frozen Ground, in which John Cusack portrays Hansen. However, we should never forget that the victims were real people who suffered unimaginable horrors at the hands of a vicious killer. Robert Hansen's chilling legacy serves as a grim reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind a facade of normalcy.